aperture is the opening in a lens through which light enters the camera, and the aperture is expressed in f-stops. And so you'll see on your display the numbers like f2.8, f4 and f8 and so on. When you're reading f-stop numbers, a smaller f-stop number like 2.8 denotes a larger aperture, so a larger opening, than say f4 or f8. And this can be a little confusing, especially if you're a beginner photographer. And the reason the smaller number equals a larger aperture, it's like an inverse relationship, has to do with the math. And when we say f2.8, we're actually referring to a shortened form of a fraction. And what we actually mean is f1 over 2.8. So in reality, if you remember your math, as a number, f1 over 2.8 is actually larger as a number than f1 over 4. But then let's not let that confuse us. Just remember, when you see a smaller number, means a larger aperture, and you should be fine. So the primary effect of aperture is obviously how much light enters your lens. So a wider aperture or lower f-stop allows more light in, brightening the image, and a narrow aperture or a higher f-stop permits less light in, darkening the image. But aperture also has another effect on your image, and that is the creative effect. It affects what we call depth of field. Depth of field determines how much of your background and foreground in the image you are focused on will also be in focus. So wider apertures result in a shallow depth of field. And what that means is it blurs the background and foreground, whilst narrower apertures increase the depth of field, keeping more of your scene in focus. So whenever you want your subject to stand out from the background, you want to use wider apertures so that your subject is in focus and the background is pushed out of focus. And that applies to the foreground as well. On the other hand, say you're shooting a group photo where people are standing in rows, and you want everyone in that group to be in focus, or you're shooting a landscape, you want to use a narrow aperture so that all the people in the rows from front to back are in focus. So, quick tip, lower f-stop equals more light, equals shallow depth of field, while the higher f-stop, less light and greater depth of field.